Hello and welcome. Today, we'll explore the easiest ways to learn English from scratch. I'm here with my friend Sarah, who's also passionate about helping people start their English learning journey. Sarah, what do you think is the most important first step when someone is just beginning to learn English?
Well, the first step is to not overthink it. A lot of people feel overwhelmed, but really, it's about getting started. Start with simple things, like learning basic greetings and familiarizing yourself with common phrases.
That makes a lot of sense. So, instead of diving into grammar rules right away, focus on building a foundation of simple words and phrases.
Exactly. You'd be surprised at how much you can learn by just listening to English conversations, even if you don't understand everything at first. It's about getting used to the sounds and rhythms of the language.
Yeah, that sounds like a great approach. I think a lot of people forget how important listening is. You don't need to understand every word to start getting the hang of it. What about speaking? How can someone practice speaking when they're starting from zero?
One of the easiest ways is to practice with someone who's already fluent, like a language partner. But if that's not possible, you can start speaking to yourself. Even repeating phrases you hear in movies or podcasts helps build confidence.
I love that tip. Speaking to yourself might feel a bit weird at first, but it's such a great way to get comfortable with forming sentences. How about learning vocabulary? Any tips for beginners?
Yes, start with topics that interest you. If you love cooking, learn food-related vocabulary. If you enjoy movies, focus on words and phrases from films. It makes learning feel more fun and less like a chore.
That's such a great approach. Learning vocabulary based on your interests can definitely make things feel more natural. Another thing I've noticed is that beginners often focus a lot on memorizing lists of words. But Sarah, do you think that's the best way to go about it?
Not really. While memorizing vocabulary can help, it's more important to learn how to use the words in context. For example, instead of just memorizing words like apple or book, try to use them in simple sentences. Like, I want to eat an apple or I'm reading a book. This way, you're practicing both the vocabulary and sentence structure at the same time.
That makes so much sense. So, it's not just about knowing the word, but also about knowing how to use it in real conversations. And speaking of real conversations, do you think language apps are helpful for beginners?
Absolutely. Language apps can be a great tool, especially when you're just starting out. They usually offer a mix of vocabulary, grammar, and listening practice, which is perfect for beginners. However, it's important to not rely only on apps. You need to try speaking with real people, too.
Right. Apps are great for building a foundation, but practicing with real people makes the learning experience much more dynamic. How can someone find people to practice with if they're just starting?
There are tons of language exchange platforms where you can meet native speakers or other learners. Websites and apps like Tandem, HelloTalk, or even Facebook groups are great places to find language partners. You don't need to be perfect, just start having conversations. The more you practice, the better you'll get.
I agree. And when you're practicing with a partner, even if you make mistakes, it's all part of the learning process. Mistakes are actually a good thing, right?
Exactly. Mistakes are how we learn. When you make an error and someone corrects you, you're building knowledge that will stick with you. It's way better than avoiding speaking because you're afraid of making mistakes. Besides, native speakers are usually really understanding when you're just learning.
So true. Now, what about reading and writing? Do you think beginners should dive into reading books or writing essays right away?
Not at first. For beginners, it's better to start with short articles, social media posts, or even song lyrics. Reading these things helps you get used to the language in small chunks. As for writing, I suggest keeping a journal in English, even if it's just a few sentences a day. It's a great way to practice without the pressure of writing perfect essays right away.
I love the idea of a journal. It's a low-pressure way to practice writing while still improving. So, to summarize, it sounds like the key is to start with the basics, focus on listening and speaking, and practice in real-life situations. Anything else we should keep in mind?
One last thing, be patient with yourself. Learning a language is a journey, not a race. Celebrate the small wins along the way, whether it's understanding a word you've heard 1,000 times or finally having a short conversation in English. Every little step counts.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah, for all these amazing tips. It's clear that learning English doesn't have to be complicated. It's about starting simple, staying consistent, and enjoying the process.
Yes, I do it all the time. Watching shows in English with subtitles is one of my favorite ways to learn. It's a natural way to hear the language being used in context, and you pick up a lot of informal phrases and slang that you wouldn't find in textbooks. Plus, you get to enjoy something you already love, so it's motivating.
Exactly. I've found that when learning feels like a fun activity instead of a chore, it becomes so much easier to stay consistent. Another great idea is to use flashcards for vocabulary, right? There are even apps now that make this process more interactive and fun.
That's right, flashcards are a great tool. You can use physical cards or digital ones, like Anki or Quizlet, to reinforce what you're learning. The key is to review them regularly, especially words or phrases you struggle with. And as you grow, you can start adding more complex phrases or even grammar rules.
That's a great point about reviewing regularly. It's not about learning everything all at once, but about consistent practice. So, do you have any advice on staying motivated, especially when you feel stuck or frustrated?
Definitely, the most important thing is to remind yourself of your goals. Why are you learning English, whether it's for travel, work, or personal growth? Keeping that reason in mind will help you push through tough moments. Also, it's okay to take breaks and recharge. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Celebrate progress, no matter how small.
I love that perspective. It's all about progress, not perfection, and finding ways to make it fun and rewarding along the way. One last question. Do you think it's useful to learn some basic grammar early on, or is that something that can come later?
I think a little bit of basic grammar can be helpful, just to understand how sentences are structured. But don't get too caught up in the rules right away. Start with the basics, things like present simple, personal pronouns, and basic question forms. As you grow, you can dive deeper into more complex grammar. But at the beginning, just focus on communicating.
That's a perfect approach. Learn to communicate first, and the grammar will come naturally as you practice. Thanks so much, Sarah, for sharing all these valuable insights. I think listeners will really benefit from these practical tips.
That's a great question. For me, consistency is all about creating a routine. Even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day, I make sure I'm doing something in English. Whether it's listening to a podcast, watching a short video, or reviewing flashcards, small daily actions build up over time. And when I don't feel like studying, I remind myself of how much progress I've made and how good it feels to communicate in English.
I love that. Even just 10 to 15 minutes a day can make such a big difference over time. And as you said, progress is the biggest motivator. Sometimes we forget how much we've already learned.
Exactly. And one thing I always tell learners is to not compare yourself to others. Everyone has their own pace. Some days you'll feel on top of the world, and other days you might feel stuck. That's all part of the journey.
Such a great point. Comparison can be a huge barrier to motivation. It's better to focus on your own progress and celebrate each milestone, whether it's understanding a conversation, having your first full sentence in English, or finishing your first English book.
Yes, and remember, learning English or any language doesn't happen overnight. But every time you practice, you're building something that lasts. So enjoy the process and be kind to yourself along the way.
Such wise words. And for anyone out there starting their English journey, remember, it's all about taking small steps, making it part of your routine, and enjoying the experience. Whether it's through listening, speaking, or writing, you're always moving forward.
Exactly, so don't rush it, and trust that you'll get there. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and you'll see results before you know it.
Right, it's really about trusting the process. You might not notice it right away, but one day, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. So, before we wrap things up, Sarah, could you share a few quick tips for someone who's feeling overwhelmed or unsure about where to start?
Of course. First, I would say, start small and keep it simple. Don't pressure yourself to learn everything at once. Pick 1 or 2 things to focus on each week, like learning 5 new words or practicing a common phrase. Next, be consistent. Even on the days when you feel like you're not making progress, stick with it. A little bit every day goes a long way. And lastly, remember to have fun. Enjoy the process, whether it's watching a movie in English or chatting with a friend. The more you enjoy it, the easier it will feel.
Those are some excellent tips. Starting small, staying consistent, and having fun are definitely key. I think a lot of people get discouraged when they feel like they're not learning fast enough. But if you keep moving forward, no matter how slow it feels, you'll get there.
Exactly. It's all about patience, and sometimes the best progress comes when you least expect it. Keep challenging yourself, but also give yourself credit for what you've already accomplished.
Yes, small wins are so important. And even when things get tough, remember that learning a language is about building confidence, not perfection. One thing I always tell people is, don't be afraid to speak. Even if you make mistakes, speaking helps you improve faster.
Yes, the more you speak, the more comfortable you become. And let's face it, everyone makes mistakes, no matter how fluent they are. So, embrace it, laugh about it, and keep going.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, English is a tool for connection. The more you use it, the more opportunities you will have to connect with people, discover new things, and grow.
Absolutely. Learning English is not just about knowing the language, it's about opening doors to new experiences, new cultures, and new relationships. So, keep going, and don't get discouraged. You've got this.
That's such a great perspective, Sarah. Learning English truly opens up a whole new world. And as you said, it's about progress, not perfection. So for anyone feeling stuck right now, just remember that the little steps you take today are the foundation for bigger achievements tomorrow.
Exactly. And one thing to keep in mind is that every learner's path looks different. Some might get a good grasp of grammar quickly, while others might excel in speaking first. It's all about finding what works for you. And it's totally fine to change your learning style along the way if something doesn't feel right.
That's a great point. Flexibility is important. You might start with one approach and then find something else that fits your lifestyle or goals better. And speaking of goals, it's really helpful to set specific, achievable ones, right?
Yes, setting small, measurable goals can really keep you on track. For example, aim to learn 10 new words each week, or practice speaking for 5 minutes a day. These little goals add up, and when you reach them, it gives you a sense of accomplishment and motivation to keep going.
I think those small wins are what make the learning process feel rewarding. When you hit those goals, you feel like you're moving forward, and that keeps the momentum going. And like you said earlier, celebrating those wins, no matter how small, helps you stay motivated.
Exactly, it's the little victories that matter most. Whether it's understanding a sentence in a conversation or finishing your first English podcast episode, those are all signs of progress. They show that you're growing, and that's what matters in the end.
Such great advice. It's all about keeping track of those small victories and building confidence along the way. And I think when you focus on enjoying the journey, rather than just the destination, learning English becomes a much more exciting and fulfilling experience.
Absolutely. And the beauty of language learning is that it's never really done. Even advanced learners are constantly picking up new things, whether it's slang, idioms, or cultural nuances. It's a lifelong adventure that's always evolving.
I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things that makes language learning so rewarding. There's always something new to discover. Whether you're just starting out or you've been learning for years, every day brings an opportunity to grow.
Exactly. So, to anyone listening, if you're just starting your English journey or if you've been learning for a while, keep pushing forward. Celebrate every step, enjoy the process, and remember that every word, sentence, and conversation gets you closer to your goal.
Well said, Sarah. Thanks so much for sharing all your insights today. I'm sure our listeners are feeling inspired and ready to take their English skills to the next level. Thank you, Sarah. This has been such an inspiring conversation. It's so motivating to hear your perspective on language learning and how to make it enjoyable and achievable. I think anyone listening today will feel more confident about taking their first steps or continuing on their journey with English.
It's been a pleasure, and just a reminder to everyone learning English, or any language, is about persistence, curiosity, and having fun with it. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to keep practicing. Even if you make mistakes, they're part of the learning process.
Yes, and when you focus on progress instead of perfection, every small achievement adds up. And eventually, you'll find yourself reaching milestones you didn't even expect. The key is to enjoy each step and not be afraid to experiment with different methods, like listening to music, watching videos, or speaking with others.
Absolutely, and remember that you're not alone on this journey. There are so many people around the world learning English, and there's a whole community of learners and teachers ready to support you. So don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions, and connect with others.
Exactly. Whether through online communities or real-life interactions, there's always support out there. And finding that sense of connection is such an important part of the learning experience. It makes the process feel less intimidating and more like a shared adventure.
And the best part is, with every conversation, every new word, and every challenge you face, you're not just learning a language, you're opening yourself up to new cultures, new opportunities, and new experiences. It's a truly enriching experience.
You're so right. Learning English isn't just about speaking. It's about connecting with the world. And the more you learn, the more doors open up to you, whether it's for travel, career, or just expanding your perspective.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, remember that each step you take brings you closer to where you want to be. Whether you're listening to this podcast or reading an article in English, you're making progress. Keep going, and remember that you're capable of achieving your goals.
Such great words to end on, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights today. To our listeners, keep practicing, stay motivated, and enjoy every moment of your English learning journey. And with that, we've reached the end of today's episode. A big thank you to Sarah for sharing such valuable tips and insights on how to make learning English easier and more enjoyable. We hope this conversation has inspired you to take your first steps or continue your language journey with confidence.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a great discussion. To everyone out there learning English, keep going, you've got this.
Remember, progress is progress, no matter how small. Stay consistent, make it fun, and most importantly, enjoy the process. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.